On this video, let us see another title, Main Features of the Middle Ages. Medieval Europe was feudal in its rural economy. The ruling class of feudal societies was made up of kings, nobles, knights, and the higher clergy. They had political power and owned lands. Feudalism was a loosely organized system of rule in which powerful local lords divide their land holdings among lesser lords. Higher lords were connected with the lower lords by a system called vassalage. In this system, higher lords gave land called feud to the lower lords. In exchange, the lesser lords or vassals become loyal and give services to the greater lord. On this system, peasants were completely dominated by lords. The time when feudalism developed varied from place to place, and its practice showed change over time. For instance, in its rural economy, Europe was beginning to enter as early as 4th century. In the late Roman Empire, we can see dependent peasants called colony. They were not slaves, but gave or owned labor services to their landlords and could not leave their landlord's land. By contrast, in much of Central and Eastern Europe, serfdom started later than the Western Europe, but it became more common, harsher, and lasted longer. Manorialism was the economic system of Europe from the end of the Western Roman Empire to 1200s. The name manor comes from a Latin word, manere, meaning a large state controlled by a lord and worked by peasants. In large area of Europe, the feudal rural economy operated as follows. A lord had a manor or several manors. On a manor lived peasants. The manor or lord's estate was at the centers of medieval European economy. Movement from place to place was not allowed for serfs. Because of that, the manor was self-sufficient in that a manor supplied shelter, food, housing, and almost everything needed by its people. Peasants lived and worked on the manor. Most of them were serfs. If the manor was granted to a new lord, the serfs went along with it. They were permanently tied with the lands of the landlord. The lord kept parts of the manor under his own direct control. The lands of the landlord was called dimension and was cultivated for the lord by unpaid compulsory corvée labor of his serfs. The product of this land went to the lord for his own household consumptions or sale. Peasants also paid feudal dues in kind like cheese, eggs, clothes, honey, etc. or in cash or money to the lord. Besides, peasants paid fees. They kept the lord's wine press, flour mills, and baking oven. They also repaired his fences, roads, and bridges. A lord also had legal authority or rights over his serfs. He or his agents could hear case of crime and impose many fees as punishment or hang a serf in case of serious crime like murder. In return for their labor and other payments, peasants were allowed to cultivate some of the lands of the manor to support themselves and their families. They were also given protection by their lord from raids or warfare. Although they were not free from leave the manor without the permission of the lord, they could not be forced off the manor. The feudal societies in medieval Europe was sharply divided into two classes. These were The privileged upper classes consisted of kings, nobles, higher clergy and knights, and the unprivileged lower classes composed of the great mass of peasants or serfs. Hierarchical position in feudal society were determined by birth. On the tops of the social ladder was the king. Below the king stood the powerful lords who pledged alliance and military service in return for the fiefs or plots of land granted to them by him. This relationship was called vassalage. During the time, kings were weak. Local lords or nobles assumed the function of the government within their territory. Real power was exercised by regional lords. The nobles made laws, levied taxes, dispensed justice, and waged war. The nobles governed people by their personal whim or desire. These kinds of authoritarian leadership, while prevailed in the medieval feudal society of Europe, is referred to as the rule of men, as opposed to the rule of law. The absence of rule of law exposed the citizens of medieval Europe to live by whim of their lords. The great lords granted lands to the lesser lords in exchange for alliance and military service. The lowest and most numerous groups of the nobles consisted the bulks of the feudal armies. In the early Middle Ages, cavalry became increasingly important in war. Kings and great lords needed a men who were experienced at fighting on horseback, wearing armor, and carrying a shield, lance, or spear and sword. Medieval soldiers were called knights, or mounted warriors, in return for their military service. Kings and great lords gave land to the knights. In the early Middle Ages, when money was very abundant, but land was plentiful, the easiest way for a king or great lords to get knights was give a knight land. The land provided material resource for knights to equip themselves with horses, armor, and weapons. In the late Middle Ages, or from 1350 out to 1500 AD, knights adopted a code of conduct or elaborate rules called chivalry. Chivalry required knights to be brave, loyal, and true to their word, and in warfare, they had to fight fairly. Warriors also had to treat a captured knight well, or even release him if he promised to pay his ransom. Noble women also played active roles in the medieval period warrior society. The lady of the manor took over the duty of her husband or father when he was away from the manor for a war. She supervised vassals, managed the household, and performed necessary agricultural and medical tasks. Sometimes she might even have to go to war to defend her state. A few medieval noblewomen were actively involved in politics, particularly during the High Middle Age, or from 1000 up to 1350 AD, and during the Late Middle Age, or from 1350 up to 1500 AD. Women's right to inheritance were restricted under the feudal system. Land was usually passed to the eldest son in the family. Sometimes women did inherit fiefs, but a woman frequently received land as parts of her dowry. The serfs were peasants who by law had to work the land they were born on. They depended on the nobles for their livelihood. The serf was not a free man, or he could not leave the lands of the lord without the lord's permission. Serfdom and corvée labor imposed on them. The serfs lived a hard, tedious life and had little opportunity for recreation and education. The serfs were the largest groups of the people who were at the bottoms of the social ladder. If you have further information about the political and social hierarchy in the medieval Europe, you can discuss more.